So I have got the pleasure of introducing my friend and esteemed colleague in wellness, Elena Berdajevsky. Welcome to Ageless by Rescue. I'm so happy to have you here to talk all about the science of pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such a wonderful topic, and I can't think of a better platform to share this information on.
You know, one of our most popular podcast episodes was with Samantha X,
Mm-hmm.
who is, a sexpert. And I think we've published a couple of articles also on pleasure, on intimacy, and how that relates in the ageless conversation. Because truly, as we've discussed on a number of occasions, and as you're about to celebrate, a milestone birthday yourself, pleasure is ageless, and it's the science of pleasure. Once you understand it, and once you understand kind of the premise for discovering pleasure, understanding sexuality, and how to turn it on if it's waned, can really benefit and contribute to a life of vitality and of cellular wellness, of happiness. And there's so many benefits to, a good, healthy sex life, whatever that may be for you, whether it's solo sex, whether it's with a partner, whatever it is. And I really want to deep dive into a particular niche aspect, which you're an expert in. And that's the science of Tantra, because it is an ancient wisdom. And I think that, from a lot of the ancient sciences, we can learn so much for a modern life. So I'm going to let you give us a little bit of a background and demystify the world of Tantra.
Oh, absolutely. And, I really want to clarify that I am a student of Tantra. And the beauty of it is that people can have incredible expertise in it, but it's a thousands years old tradition that is all about expanding and diving deeper. And that's what Tantra actually means. It implies that our life force energy, this biofield that we have beneath and beyond the skin, can have infinite expandability, can have an infinite electric and magnetic current. And that is where that life force is derived from. So using the gateway of the flesh and an approach to sexuality as a form of awakening that electricity, we really do fire up the cells and the hormonal faculties in our bodies that bring us to this beautiful harmony, a state of homeostasis, and allow for that more eternal sense of youthfulness and agelessness through the gateway of sexuality. And looking at sexuality in this much more esoteric and subtle way, which is a discipline in and of itself in our modern world.
I think something that you touched on, which I really want to get some of the science behind this, is you talked about, enlivening the cells and that electro field. A lot of us chase that elusive chemical connection in relationship or with sexuality. And, the science tells us that does wane. That's, it's an ancient and genetic form of bonding where you have that intensity of desire and passion and sexual chemistry. But then again, from an evolutionary perspective, we have been designed to lose the heat in the desire and the intensity of sexual chemistry, so that we don't lose ourselves by this really primal drive. And so, when it comes to talking about ageless pleasure and sex in the paradigm of agelessness, so whether you're in a post-menopausal kind of stage of your life, or if you're recovering from some form of trauma or exhaustion or illness that's impacted, or lifestyle that's impacted that desire, or whether it is that you've been in a relationship for past what we've been designed to have that heat and passion for. Are there, techniques that you recommend to clients, or things that you know of that can maybe not bring back that initial fire, but can certainly restart the fire and sustain it in a way that's enjoyable?
Oh, it is such a phenomenal question. And I think it's almost the solution to not only an ageless cellular body, but also a more eternal sense of love and connection in our partnerships. And the hormone distinction between that sort of procreative animalistic sex versus a more slow release tantric sexual experience is that the first one produces dopamine, which is what makes it animalistic. Dopamine is a very goal-oriented hormone. It's like the more we have it, the more we want it, the more we want it. Its beauty is that it's short spikes, but it's also unsustainable. Then when we are in love, then oxytocin is produced, but it's only produced, as we know, in couples for a couple of years, which is how nature designed it for us to raise the child until, according to nature, this little child is small enough to be more or less independent and doesn't need both parents as much. So from a procreative perspective, if we don't acknowledge the deeper elements of sex, once those two hormones kind of run out, we kind of go, well, what's left? The beauty about Tantra is that the wisdom states you have an energetic body, which is forever there. So it is unrelated. Our biofield is kind of the heat we emit, the chemistry, the emotions that's beyond the skin, is a part of our framework, even when perhaps our physical cells can start to shift or decline. And the hormone that is produced even more so during Tantra is actually serotonin. And serotonin is more of a consciousness high. It is more of a self-actualization. So couples that have been together for a while or not interested in children and want to know how to keep their relationship fresh, Tantra and using that sexual energy to awaken and produce some serotonin and other forms of endorphins actually expands, if you like, our energy and our chakra system beyond the genitals and beyond just the couple unit. And so people who practice Tantra kind of build up that sexual energy and expand it through their hearts and through their minds, and as a form of improving their cognition, as a form of a spiritual practice, as a form of connecting the kundalini at the base of the spine with the pineal gland. And so the tantric experience becomes a source of well-being, not just connecting and bonding for family, but a way of getting this elixir of youth that our body naturally produces and to circulate and to move.
There's always, it's a joke that if someone is having sex or is in a new relationship, they glow up. And there's that, je ne sais quoi about a man or a woman who's freshly in love and is, really connected with their partner, enjoying a really passionate sexual relationship. You can literally see it oozing out of their pores. Their skin looks better. Their gait is more confident. Their energy is different. Their, health and vibrancy seems to really sing. There are also, some, I guess, not so good side effects in that, it does make you crazy. It's considered a form of madness, that initial phase of falling in love and that, passionate, lust-driven phase of a relationship. Is there any science that that you know of that speaks to the physiological changes that you do see in people who are in that first phase, or people who are practicing Tantra and are able to have that physiological change?
Yes, absolutely. So Let's start with that addicted. I can't think about anything but that person. That's the dopamine. That's the rush that you need, and you need more and more of that person. And if you are not in their energy field and experiencing their scent and their voice, then your body kind of gets a little bit down and deflated. So you just dream about getting that dopamine fix as well. So there's that. But in terms of the beaming feeling, that tends to happen when the heart is open as well. So somebody that is just having primal or carnal sex will not have a glow as much as someone whose hearts are open and syncing up. And according to the HeartMath Institute, who have done quite a lot of research over the sovereignty of the heart as an intelligence center compared to the mind. And the Institute discovered that not only does the heart have 40,000 more neurons than the brain, it emits 5,000 times rather higher magnetic field. And that when people are in heart alignment, it creates a sense of resonance. So it's a sense of familiarity. And so when this heart energy, and the heart produces a lot of feel-good chemicals in our bodies as well, it is a big generator of serotonin. When our heart is synced up with another, plus adding that 5,000 times more magnetic effect, we almost become high, like on a natural drug. And that's why we're beaming and we're glowing, because when we think in reverse, what stress and aging do to us, cortisol, it kind of contracts and shrinks us, and it takes all our life force and kind of pulls us in and shrivels us. Whereas these chemical reactions are almost a reversing of aging, an amplifying again of our cells, of our hormone systems. Amazing sex and love produce more estrogen, and so we are more fertile with that energy. So our whole body is kind of like lit up by the chemical process that are happening because the heart is engaged. And if the sex is satisfying, which is a big component of it, then when we're building up sexual energy quite often, then that too has incredible effects across all physical markers, from an improved cognition rate because of the heart-mind connection. It creates a whole brain functioning, which relaxes the nervous system. It improves immunity. It has a flow-on effect by harmonizing the body and the mind. And so, yeah, the whole brain functioning is what has a flow-on effect to every other part of
That's
us.
so interesting. Do you know, the other thing I was going to say is that in all of the aging research, what they speak about is a restricted calorie diet, exercise, reduction of stress, and a steady relationship are repeatedly in all long-term scientific studies shown to be the hallmarks of someone who will experience longevity and also an improved health span. So really the conversation around pleasure, sexual satisfaction, connection with your partner is really an anti-aging and a longevity conversation, because we are wired to live, in partnership and to enjoy, a love and intimacy. And by extending that, if there are tools, if there are sciences, if there are techniques to help, solidify that pillar, it's as important as eating well. It's as important as exercising. It's as important as having, your blood test and your hormones checked. So for me, when, I think our collective consciousness as a Western society has really come a long way. We're talking about pleasure as an innate right, whereas, 50 years ago even, pleasure wasn't a right. It wasn't something that people necessarily seeked out. It was a byproduct, and if you were lucky, you would experience pleasure, intimacy, connection in a partnership. but you know, we've come such a long way, and it's really exciting that, you know, there are programs like, you know, when Goop did their whole series on sexuality, and that was aired on, you know, a mainstream
Mm,
carrier, uh, and you know, David Jones is now selling sex toys. um,
mm.
the conversation is really, really primed to discuss the well-being benefits of having satisfaction, of pleasure, of intimacy, of expanding that, you know, heart brain connection within a relationship. So I want to kind of jump to some of the things that you could share with us that, you know, without possibly doing an entire course on Tantra, uh, some of the things that you would recommend to your clients, because you are a coach for femininity, cognitive behavior, you're a cognitive behavioral coach as well. So I'm really curious as to what are some of the techniques you teach your clients.
Yes. Well, there are actually a lot of very happy people in relationships who are living longer, as you say, but who are not entirely sexually empowered. And there is an upper limit to what we think sex is or normal or pleasure is, because it is only recently that this exploration of our primal intelligence is seeing the light. And that is because, first we had, the mindset revolution that, thoughts become things and your thinking is very important and thoughts shape everything. But then people were still kind of experiencing stored trauma in the body. Then we went down into, the heart space and emotional intelligence and living from the heart and exploring the importance of the heart as an intelligence and spiritual gateway. And yet things were still like missing a little bit. And then finally, we go sort of into the depths of the sexual exploration and realizing, okay, maybe there is something more to it. And that is the awakening of primal intelligence. And the first thing that I start with my clients is just the realization that such a thing exists. That
You're right.
for
And
my
like, if you don't accept that such a thing exists, where that's the first place, right? Acceptance and acknowledgement of it as an option.
Exactly. And sometimes I ask women to put their hands on their womb and just connect, and they're like, oh, they never have done that. That these could be energy portals. We look at the genitals as birthing or functional or maybe sexual pleasure domains, but to explore and understand and expand your view of yourself as a more energetic framework is already an incredible paradigm shift. And for people who are single, they start to enjoy their exploration of themselves in whole new subtle ways, and that the definition of pleasure can expand beyond our sexual organs or our genitals, and that sensuality and our I'm touching my hand for a reason here, our energetic field is so subtle that something as simple as brushing your palm with your fingertips can be pleasurable, and tickling the back of your own neck can be pleasurable. And if our body is an instrument of pleasure and an awakening of this electricity, then what does that mean in partnership? What does that mean for other faculties in ourselves that can be seen as pleasurable? So by understanding that this primal intelligence is the core of who we are and it informs everything else, and that it's very sensuality based rather than sexuality based, gives permission to a whole group of people, regardless of their age or relationship status or wellness status, to see themselves as erotic beings.
So I'm interested on your take on, you know, the new kind of paradigm that we're living in, where sex has become a lot more available. because of, the dating culture has shifted to online dating, whereas you might have met your partner through an introduction or on a night out or through school or through, friendship groups. You now literally are able to pick up your phone and have a menu of available either sex or life partners. And so I would venture to guess that the number of, sexual interactions and partners that men and women are having has, exploded since, that movement. And of course, we had, the sexual revolution in the past, and we had, the pill and all of those things that have, gradually shifted the dial from monogamy, like pure monogamy and lifetime monogamy, to multiple sex partners, multiple sexual experiences. How does that then work in terms of self-discovery and also in the paradigms of Tantra and connection? Can you have meaningful, soulful, heart-resonating connections with a series of short relationships, a series of one-night stands? Are people being, I guess, led to really stay in that frenzied initial phase of like animalistic connection because they're having lots of short relationships, and then they become addicted to that high of having a series of short, highly charged relationships?
That is such a great question. And, I love your parallel around food, and your whole platform is dedicated to mastery over our bodies. And just because food is more available on Uber Eats doesn't mean that it nourishes us even more. But when we know how to eat, eat to our blueprint, eat to our blood type, that will always make wonderful choices, whether we are ordering food off an app or we're in a, hatted restaurant overseas. And that to me feels very familiar to apply to sex. So if you are someone who understands your sexual energy, who knows how to sync your genitals with your heart, who respects the, I guess, sovereignty of your biofield and kind of keeping it integral and not letting into any negative energies, then you will be choosing your sexual partners from a different compass, a different mechanism. You won't be choosing partners because they are visually sexy or because you are lonely or because you just want to have like this primal experience and get that dopamine hit. So I guess if you're tantric, you can still absolutely enjoy variety and being I don't want to use the word promiscuous, but you can have as much variety in your sex life as you choose, but the quality of it will be incredibly different because the connection that you're able to foster to your body and between you and your partner, your lover, will have a very different effect in terms of its nourishment. So I'm not sure if that entirely answers your question, but if you are sexually uninspired or you're not tantric or this is not anything that you've been curious about or exploring, then you're going to continue having, what I call McDonald's sex. It'll be great, it'll be comfortable, it'll be convenient, but it won't reach the heights of mastery as, say, something a raw food chef could prepare you with carefulness and cultivation.
One of the I think the first time I heard about Tantra was when Sting and his wife Trudy, they were in all the media about having tantric sex, and the thing that kind of lingered as the memory of what tantric sex is was to be able to have hour-long orgasms. And so it kind of went into the realms of hippie, esoteric. And people were like, oh, I don't know if I want to have a 1-hour orgasm. I don't know what that feels like. Facilitation of courses was always in groups. We'd seen it in movies, in shows. And how has that, how true is that of tantric sex? Or is that just one small aspect of it? And, if people are curious to develop, the the art of Tantra, the science of Tantra, what are the options nowadays?
Oh, it's another wonderful question. And, this is not the sexiest term, but sometimes I call what I do suburban Tantra, that I do not have hour-long orgasms. I did go to that extreme, during my training, and it's possible. And dare I say, I think Trudy and Sting were just showing off, and it's possible, and perhaps they had time. And what's beautiful about Tantra is that it's synonymous with connection. So you can have a tantric experience for 5 minutes, and you can have a tantric experience for 30 minutes or an hour, or if you and your lover have 4 hours or a whole weekend away, then you can expand that connection for as long as is required. But the essence of Tantra is syncing up. And when your bodies are in sync, and when you have the discipline to slow down the sexual act, in essence, what it means, and what Sting and Trudy were talking about, is that they have trained themselves to build up their sexual energy, but not release it through orgasm, and build it up and then just keep drinking it into your cells, keep absorbing it and not releasing it. And that's what creates those hormonal benefits, the relaxation of the nervous system, that when you're building up that sexual energy, you can kind of stay on the high for a lot longer. And when people are having tantric orgasms, it's not like that intense, quick, kind of quickie dopamine orgasm that we have. It just means that I'm kind of pulsating my hands a bit, but that state of heightened erotic arousal is higher. So you're on that wave higher. So it may be at an 80% for hours. And it's still orgasmic energy. So if you stay in that highly orgasmic energy for half the day, then you can absolutely say you've had a 4-hour orgasm. But it doesn't mean that it's that strong, intense, the climax. So orgasm and climax are quite separate in the tantric dialect, because orgasm is a heightened state. A climax is like over the edge, finished.
So in terms of talking about climax and the sustenance of that electricity of pleasure, one of the things that I think is really interesting is that for elite athletes, in performance, and also in a lot of therapy, there's this talk about abstinence and the power of abstinence, because so much of our energy is dissipated during climax or orgasm. And so, elite athletes are instructed not to have sexual experiences before a big game, or a lot of high performers in other fields talk about a period of abstinence where they really rebuilt their lives by taking sexual energy off the table as a menu item. What's the science behind that, and what are your thoughts and experiences around that topic?
Yeah, I would call that a non-tantric approach. So if you are not tantric, then you generally would not have the training or discipline to hold yourself in a slightly orgasmic state without getting more excited and without
dissipating energy.
Dissipating energy. Because when you look at why is semen life force? Because it creates life. It's lesser so for women, but again, there is a big spike to having an actual climax, and then the endorphins are up, but then there is a certain level of come down. So it can destabilize those very quick dopamine, a quick rush and a decline can really destabilize the nervous system. It's almost like when people go on antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, the doctor says, come off it gently. So orgasms create a short-term hit of those positive processes. So boom, when we come down gently, it can be...
Well, the French call an orgasm a little death.
Yeah, petit mot. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that I think what the French mean, however, is an absolution of the ego. So
Ah,
that's what I read in a recent French book recently. That it's a little death because you sort of absolve and you forget yourself.
I
Um,
like that.
but I'm sure there is a biophysical process that happens with that. Um, but back to your question, a more tantric approach would be to keep your sexual energy maybe at a 40% through touch, if you can, gently masturbate or dancing or just whatever it is that lights you up a bit and turns you on, so that your faculties are awakened, so that you are more alert and more on fire, but you're not so stoked and overheated that there may be that temptation to climax and to release that energy. So I think for safety purposes, especially for athletes for whom a lot is at stake, the expert definition is just don't go there at all, because you may not be able to stop yourself. But I think 20 to 40 to 50% sexual energy awakening is incredibly healthy, and I would choose that over complete dormant.
So the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, again in the concept of ageless, is, we what has traditionally happened is that people are very sexually active in their late teens and 20s, and but a lot of times when you look at research, most of those experiences are reported as not being the best sex of their lives. It might be very athletic, it might be very often, it might be very varied, but a lot of people report that it wasn't until later in life, often in their late 30s, or in the confines of a relationship where they were able to like really explore their sexuality, is when they reported the greatest satisfaction and depth of pleasure and connection. And so I think that research is really exciting because, as we expand our longevity, we're going to potentially have multiple life partners for whatever reason. And also society has, moved away from the taboo of divorce and repartnering. And so I'm interested on your take, particularly in the clients that you see, if you've seen examples of people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond who've had their sexual awakening much later in life, and what that looks like, and the benefits of that.
Beautiful. It can look two ways. So the first sexual awakening is in women who are coming out of an unhealthy and unhappy long-term marriage, where their self-esteem, their self-expression, their sexuality was somehow distorted, manipulated, or denied. And so there is a sense of that woman that she was decades ago, but was suppressed, re-emerging, and that beautiful maiden and minx is coming out to play. And so the women feel internally quite youthful and vibrant, and that's what we tend to see younger lovers, and a lot more dancing. So as in tantra they would say the Shakti is dancing, and there is this real freedom of expression and enjoying your body without inhibition. So in tantra, the greatest suggestion for women and men, but especially for women, to achieve deeper sexual pleasure is relaxation. And that is what it allows for that sexual energy to kind of expand and flow. Whereas in our society, this quick sex is all about like tensing, hurry up, and women tense, and it's like, again, it's that climax and release using the dopamine hit. But in Tantra, if there is a sense of relaxing, letting go, surrendering, then the sexual experiences for the woman become a lot deeper, a lot more pleasurable. She can breathe into it a lot more and feel about what's going on a lot more without checking out. And Relaxation is also linked to the high probability of having a cervical orgasm, which is considered the most rare and medicinal orgasm because the vaginal canal in relaxation to kind of get to the cervix has to be so deep that that is the only way that the cervix can be accessed. And so women who are emerging and having new sexual adventures or have that inner peace with their bodies and what they're doing sexually, that correlates with a level of relaxation, which means that they're able to feel into their body and enjoy themselves a lot more and have stronger orgasms, not even necessarily due to what's going on hormonally, but to their own availability and receptivity and actually allowing themselves to sense and feel and not check out and kind of worry about what their body looks like or whether they're pleasing and doing things right. Sex truly becomes for themselves.
And in terms of men and aging, there's obviously the physicality of being able to have an erection that declines with age, and also stamina, as you touched on, self-image, all of that. So how does Tantra work for men?
Oh, it's a great question. And Tantra is an incredible gift to men over 30 because it teaches you to hold sexual energy and that it's okay. When we think about any erectile or virility problems that a man may have, it is either too much sexual energy, which translates as, premature ejaculation, and erectile dysfunction and difficulties because there is not enough sexual energy. So the tantric approach to that would be touch with love and without pressure, and allow the man to, I guess, reconnect and have a different relationship with his penis, one of reverence and respect, where the sexual energy can just build up without that pressure to perform. And a lot of the sexual difficulties that men and women face are due to the stress and the pressure that we put on ourselves to perform, to orgasm. Oh, sorry, I finished too quickly. Are you there yet? Come on, how much longer do I need to be doing this? And all those messages file away. And for men, their penis in our society is perceived as like a tool and a weapon. It's like, get hard and perform, get hard and perform. And when a man can't get hard and perform, it creates incredible stress. And stress goes counter to the relaxation that's required for the sexual energy to flow. So to just explore and connect with your body, with your penis without that pressure, just as an exploration, as love, as slowness. If you get too aroused, relax a little bit. If it takes you a little bit longer to feel the kind of heat in that part of your body again without any expectation, then be patient, it's okay. And building up that sexual energy, allowing it to expand from the genitals to then the hips and the legs and the chest, the arms and legs and the brain and the mind, is what is synonymous with that sense of virility, with that sense of inner strength and power. And we just have to take off the pressure and get patient with our bodies again and allow that sexual energy to be and to pulsate through us without dispersing it due to tension or impatience or habit.
It's really interesting because everything you're talking about is so instructive, and I can't help but think, we're taught so many things, but there are certain things that are key pillars of wellness, function, joy, and also dysfunction that we don't get taught. And I think one of those things, we've chatted about this before, is money. We're very rarely taught about money, and yet it forms in the thing that we spend most of our life trying to do. The other is parenting. And the third, I would say, is sex and sexuality and pleasure. At school, you learn about puberty, you learn about consent now, you learn a little bit about the mechanics of reproduction. But at no point does really, I mean, a mother sit down her daughter or a father sit down his son and say, let me tell you about your body. Let me teach you about pleasure. Let me talk to you about the types of pleasure and what you need to enjoy your sexuality, to respect your sexuality, to enhance your sexuality. This is what happens in your teens. This is what happens in your 20s. This is what happens in your 60s. We simply don't have those conversations. Are there any books? Are there any courses? Are there any movies? Are there anything that you suggest that, you know, if we are uncomfortable or if we don't have someone that can teach us those things, what do you think are some great starting points that we can privately start that self-education?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the memories of those lessons are still alive somewhere in our bones, in our cells, and in our DNA, because it was a very integral part of culture, pre-modern civilization, the Sumerian civilizations, and I can't remember kind of the names, but anything that was 3,000 to 90,000 years BC was very much a matriarchal culture where women were taught by their mothers about the labia, a different relationship to their bodies. They were even initiated and, in essence, were taught how to make love and were made love to by kind of masters in the tribe that ensured that that imprint of their first sexual experience was valuable and empowering and informed the rest of her psychology. Personal books that I love about Tantra that have really informed me, I just love Diana Richardson, The Art of Tantric Sex. I love Margot Anand. I can't remember the name of her book, but she's written over 30 books. She's kind of one of the original Tantra pioneers, and I was very privileged enough to have studied with her. Those would have to be two of my favorite ones and inform everything that there is. And then also in Australia, there is Oz Tantra, Kerry and Diane Riley, who have an incredible integral space. And the reason why I suggest those three authors and practitioners is because there is a practicality and a reverence and a respect for modern life, modern couples around Tantra. They don't divulge too far down overly esoteric rabbit holes. In terms of the events and retreats they run, there is a lot of integrity, and they keep a very sacred space in terms of exploring your own body and the one-to-one connection. And then you can take it one to many, to your partner, to whatever you like. Whereas a lot of other tantric spaces I've witnessed, they immediately begin like really high up, one to many. And it can be very overwhelming and confusing for someone who is only just exploring Tantra. And we're seeing a lot of Netflix documentaries crop up around, you know, gurus that have exploited the space. So
yeah, haven't we just? Haven't we?
My recommendations. And myself, of course.
Of course, yourself. And I can't wait for you to bring out a course in this, because I think, you know, that self-paced private learning is so valuable, particularly for things that people feel, you know, still has a taboo around it, or they're just beginning to explore an area. I'm curious as to what your thoughts are, and, you know, around pornography and the role that pornography plays to either enhance, inform, educate, or destroy, obscure, and misinform the development of pleasure and, you know, ageless sexual enjoyment. I've never heard of porn being made for that, you know, features people in, you know, in their 50s or 60s. I've never, I don't watch porn, but I've never heard of a lot of porn that people would say, yeah, that was really instructive. It really built a blueprint of what I'm now going to explore and enjoy. So I'm curious from your professional perspective, what you think is good or isn't good about pornography.
I must admit, when you asked me that question, I just had an immediate negative, visceral, almost traumatic reaction to it, because my previous experiences with porn, and also what I'm really observing porn is influencing in terms of the behavior of Generation Z, it doesn't feel integral or respectful, or as something that teaches us about pleasure and how women receive pleasure. It's just gratifying that dopamine, animalistic itch in people. And I think porn is used so often now in our culture as a stress release. So it's not about erotica or being turned on. It's just bang, I want to see something intense.
It's transactional, I guess. It's I'm going to take, a can of Diet Coke out of the fridge, drink it. It's going to give me a caffeine boost. It's going to suppress my appetite. Boom.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just about that dopamine hit, and the dopamine, because of its intensity, Coke, sugar, and caffeine hit, overrides the stresses of the day. And a lot of people, I want to say men, but tend to be men, who are facing porn addiction today, are actually not so much addicted to the porn, but just rather to the stress release and the dopamine, not the kind of content. But because of its dopamine hit, it becomes addictive, and it starts to link the imagery with the high. And that's why when people go into their own relationships, they tell themselves, or their mind tricks them, that unless they have that kind of fast, robust, whatever it is they've seen in the porn, then it's not good. They can't enjoy it. They can't have sex, even though there are so many other chemical, neurological reactions that happen during sex. There's oxytocin, there's serotonin, there's a whole host of other things, but the dopamine takes over. And I think that is very dangerous, because it limits everyone's expression around pleasure and connection. And when young people are seeing this, then this becomes locked in, and that's how they end up having sex for the rest of their lives, unless someone kind of stops them and goes, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing? You're jackhammering, or where are you? You're not even with me. Having said that, I do know that there is a lot of feminist porn that is coming out, and I will confess that I've got a list of erotic podcasts that you can listen to, and porn made by women, and there's all sorts of woke porn and different porn, but I haven't watched it, so I wouldn't know. But it is on my list just out of curiosity, and it is wonderful to see that for those who know that they're visually turned on or want to learn sex from different formats, that is available, and that we're even starting to edge open that door, that hang on, this isn't unhealthy, this is the McDonald's style of sexuality. And
I think the 50 Shades of Grey franchise kicked open that door to a whole generation of women who maybe weren't watching porn, but they started reading erotica, and then erotica became like this, it went from Mills and Boon, ravishing maidens and pirates and all of that, to a more modern day exploration of kink and sex that was out off the normal menu. And then the movies came out, and then, as you were saying, erotic podcasts, erotic audiobooks. So I guess the menu for erotic entertainment is certainly diversified. Do you think that there's a place for it as part of that expansion of sexuality and ways of discovering new ways of arousal and sustaining arousal and curiosity and experimentation in a relationship that's outside of its primal dopamine,
Mm.
oxytocin phase?
Oh, well, when we talk about erotica, I love erotica. I used to write anonymous erotica under a pseudonym in my 20s. And erotica just immediately feels delicious because it's a slow burn. It really engages the senses. There is unspoken things, there's things being left to the imagination. So it really invigorates a relationship within the self, within the reader, between you and your partner. So I consider erotica to be quite tantric in that unraveling.
Interesting.
Yeah. So to me, porn feels very fast, primal, short-term gratification. And it's like McDonald's and Coca-Cola, all to be used as a part of a healthy sexual diet. But it cannot be your only sexual diet. And one of the things that I do with my clients, especially when they're only starting to discover and awaken their sexuality, is to create an erotic Pinterest board and be absolutely curious and open-minded around what they enjoy. And there are no taboos around an exploration if it's driven by that pleasure mechanism, by the primal intelligence, what turns you on versus what should you like.
And that was
And
what was really interesting about the Goop show, is that you saw it in a laboratory kind of setting where people were introduced to different forms of pleasure, kink, erotica, and they were discovering so many things about themselves that they had no idea that they were drawn to it. They had no words for it. They'd never seen it before, and yet they were so drawn to it, so aroused by it. And so it expanded, their sexual dialogue and their sexual literacy from that exposure.
Yes. And what the body enjoys and finds pleasurable is the body's wisdom. The only kind of danger and exploration, and what I speak to people about, is if their mind has linked a pleasurable experience to something dangerous. And when we start to unpack that and separate that again, that no, the dopamine hit was because you were releasing stress, not because the porn was great. What else can you enjoy about erotica that is not that fast and heavy porn that, your partner hates? When we start to unpack and separate the mental stories and projections with just the pure pleasure and enjoyment and those electromagnetic synapses of the body, then we write a whole new script for pleasure and for erotica, which is what happened to the couples on Goop. And, the couple were able to get on the same page. And a big part of that was where they were blindfolded in a safe space. And the blindfold and just being in the body without stories, without thinking who's there, allowed them to connect with that innate intelligence. And our bodies intuitively know what's good for them, what nourishes them, what will bring them back to that state of optimal functioning. So if we're turned on by something in our bodies, then it's usually good and healthy for us. It's only when the mind links something dangerous to it.
So where then do sex toys and pleasure items fit into this exploration of Tantra? Most of them are designed for the climax response. And I guess, if you're single or if you're in a relationship and you're interested and you're drawn to this science of Tantra and how it can benefit you from, all the things that you've spoken about today, what is the role of pleasure items in that?
A part of a balanced sexual diet. So there are some hardcore Tantra purists who are not into sex toys at all, because the theory goes that we should just, our bodies, our hands, us being present should be enough. And if we cultivate enough presence and stillness, then our bodies will awaken through very subtle stimuli. And that is, in essence, Tantra. but we're also not monks and dakinis away in a temple. So we do live in a very modern world, and sex toys can be fantastic for someone who has never had an orgasm or even experienced orgasmic energy. And just to have that win, to have that experience of your body, then opens up a whole portal to other forms of stimulation. You can slow down with your own body and be tantric. You can have that, quick rush, amazing, delicious orgasm, which can be great. But hey, you've had an orgasm and a toy helped you. And for that, I think they do an incredible public service. A toy can just be like a prop within a sexual relationship, just as you may be feeding each other, your dessert with a spoon, so too you can play with toys as just another kink that you do in the bedroom. The only cautionary thing with toys is that they are very intense in terms of their stimulation, and it is an orgasm that you can get very addicted to. But to also know that it's a dopamine hit, and no human tongue or penis or fingers or any body part can move as robustly as a sex toy with a fresh pack of batteries in it. So just to be mindful of that. And again, like dessert, use it cautiously, but don't become addicted to your sex toys, because then you're missing out on the other benefits of skin on skin human sex. A sex toy isn't going to stimulate oxytocin. Sex toy may give you a little bit of rush of dopamine and serotonin, but it won't reverse aging and nourish you and bring that connection and balance and heal you in a very deep way, like human on human, present, conscious, beautiful sex will.
And metaverse sex is definitely not going to give you that either, but it might give you some companionship.
Yeah, again, better than nothing. I mean, if you are lonely and the outside world has been cruel to you, again, the metaverse world can stimulate our nervous systems, because when someone feels like a winner and a stud, or just an erotic goddess, or just somebody different, then they're still going through those same nervous stimuli and synapses as they're playing the game. But I don't know, I think I'm old school. I think human skin to skin connection with someone that you care about, or at least are drawn to in a magnetic way, is the most medicinal and nourishing thing you can have. I'm passionate
what a
about
perfect place.
Private.
Yeah. Well, that was a really beautiful way to tie it all up. And honestly, this was a much needed episode on the Ageless Biorescue podcast. I really try to cover all of the pillars of cellular wellness, vitality, longevity, and beauty. And I think, sexual energy, pleasure, at any age, at any stage is really an enormously important aspect of all of those key pillars. And what better expert to speak to than my friend, Elena Berdichevsky, whose details I'm going to link to at the end of the podcast for you. But I want to thank you so much for the wonderful amount of science and research and historical perspective you also brought to this episode, because I think that was really wonderful. As you said, once you know that it's in the realms of possibility, that's the first step towards discovering Tantra.
Oh, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure with my beautiful friend, and I have so much respect for you and all the incredible wisdom that you're cultivating here, and to be a part of it, an absolute honor. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please share and rate this episode. I'd love that.